Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with the amazing
Rebecca Wood, my co-host, and together Rebecca and I are going to spend the next hour talking about ecology and the environment. And we're going to talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and happiness of your friends and your families, and basically everybody, your neighbors, and the people you see out on the streets, and everybody and everything, because all of us are tangled up together on this wonderful little sphere here called Earth. Got a good show lined up for you today. I'm kind of breaking a rule here. First we're gonna chat for a little while, just for another 10 minutes or so, about whatever you like, and you can call in and talk to us at 877-909-1007 anytime in the next hour. And you can also send a text to 419-973-5841, and we'll read your text on the air, assuming it's suitable for a general audience, which I am assuming it will be. The guest I'm going to have, as I said, I'm sort of breaking a personal rule here. The guest I'm going to have is Stephany Seay with the Buffalovers group, talking about the Yellowstone bison. And the reason it's breaking a rule is because we had her on just recently, but there's been a dramatic new wrinkle in the whole Yellowstone bison issue. Out of the blue, Yellowstone National Park has decided to just reopen the whole concept of destroying 20 to 25% of the herd every year, and they've thrown it open for public comments, and it looks like they want to they may want to increase the number of bison that they're going to allow to survive in the park. And Stephany's going to talk to us about that, but that's why I'm asking her back on so soon. Which is important because we don't really fully understand their relationship with Bigfoot. There needs to be more study on that. That it's there's a lot of trouble with locating Bigfoot. So yeah, to make it more or less likely. Yeah, people are going to see Bigfoot. I've been listening to spooky podcasts again. You can probably tell. And of course, we have podcasts too, where after we do the show live, you can go to any podcast and Spotify or Apple, any of those, and find us, search for For a Green Future, and listen to the show again as a podcast, which is even better, believe it or not, than the live, because I take the live show and I eliminate the ums and the ahs and the awkward pauses and the you-knows. Oh man, I was listening last week to and I couldn't believe how many you-knows I said. So, I'm going to try to, stop saying so many. And whatnot. This week, yeah. So after we talk with Stephany, we'll hear from our wonderful, amazing sponsors and patrons. Then Rebecca will be speaking to us. And Rebecca, what subject have you researched this week? No, it's a little on the nose, but blizzards. Blizzards, okay, yeah. Something we're all concerned about. Then it's ecological news, and then that's our show. And hopefully, as I say, we'll hear from you at some point here, 877-909-1007, or texting at any time at 419-973-5841. So it is cold. It's cold out there, and I just wanted to it's hard to remember that at times like this. It's hard to remember that that winter is actually a good thing. Part of winter is reaching that point where you say, you know what, I've had enough of the cold, and you want it to stop. But that's when it really toughens you up, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I am tough enough now. Yeah. But one wonderful thing about winter, of course, is that once the lakes freeze over, you could do ice fishing. And this year, apparently, is a banner year for ice fishing out there in Port Clinton. There's hundreds of people on the ice right now, and maybe some of them are actually listening to this show, listening to this station. I think our signal might go out that far. It goes out almost that far, even if it doesn't get all the way to Port Clinton. But if you're an ice fisherman just sitting there, listening to the sports channel, waiting for something to bite, give us a call. Tell us what I'd like to talk to somebody who's out on the ice this year. And poor old Port Clinton needs to get some ice fishing tourism to make up for their downtown being flooded off and on. Yeah, well,
They are. I mean, I was seeing reading an article in the local Port Clinton paper, and they had a photo, and there's literally hundreds and hundreds of guys out there on the ice catching walleye, the game fish of choice around here. And so, it's hard to remember, and it's important to remind yourself as you're in your cold house or out shoveling your cold driveway that we need the cold around here. I mean, it does all kinds of things that have prevents diseases from spreading. It's nice.
Not even that cold though. It's just very, very snowy.
Well, it's
I found it to be reasonably not horrible when going outside to walk the dog, which I have to do a lot now because he peed on me twice a couple days ago.
Oh, really?
He's a very bad boy.
Well, you have to have a talk with Koga.
I did. He stopped, so maybe he heard me. I don't know.
But I consider cold when it's good cross-country skiing weather. That's when I consider it cold, and that's in the 20s. And so, we've had a lot of weather in the 20s, and hopefully after the show today, I'm going to go over and rent some cross-country skis. I've been trying to buy them, but they've been hit by that supply chain thing. It's been very hard to buy cross-country skis for the last year or so, actually. But I love cross-country skiing. That's one of the ways that I really came to terms with winter, is because in high school I used to go out and I would cross-country ski at night.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I'd be out there 1 or 2 in the morning, full moon, and everything's quiet, and you're just gliding along on your skis.
We used to cross-country ski when we lived in upstate New York when I was a kid.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's great.
It was either fun or it was not fun. Sort of alternatingly. It was fun enough that I still have happy memories of it.
Yeah. The only time it got to be fun. Not fun for me was when the snowmobilers showed up.
Oh, yeah.
Because they'd be out there at 1 and 2 in the morning, too, and they'd come and they'd be like, "What's that? Something's moving," and they'd zoom over to you. And I remember being surrounded by a bunch of snowmobilers once. I felt like a deer surrounded by.
It became suddenly a very social experience.
Yeah, but when you're alone, especially like you're out on those moonlit fields, there's really nothing like it. And if you really want to get a taste for winter and kind of like it again, I'd recommend try cross-country skiing. So, all right. Well, I think has our guest called in? All right. So I think we're going to go ahead and go right over to Stephany, and so Stephany, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us again so soon after we.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I just called because we all of a sudden, well, it's not exactly completely all of a sudden. As I understand it, out there in Yellowstone, we have the unsustainable bison hunt, basically, where they have the interagency management plan that has levels of bison elimination that are unsustainable for the herd. And I guess, I think what might have tipped this off, or what might have started that this year, is the Nez Perce tribe is saying that they don't want to start the hunting until, because the numbers are too high. And so now all of us, I don't know if this was the trigger or not, but now all of a sudden Yellowstone is saying, we're going to look at the numbers again. And right now they threw it open to public comment to change the numbers on the hunt. Have I got that pretty accurate?
Well, I'm not quite sure about that part of it. I kind of suspect that this is happening because there was the recent federal judge who ruled in favor of the buffalo in regards to an Endangered Species Act petition.
I didn't hear about that.
Pardon me, it feels... Yeah, it just happened a couple of weeks ago. There's been a petition to list the buffalo under the Endangered Species Act, was submitted in 2014, written by a Western Watersheds Project, carried by some buffalo advocates. But there have been a couple of rulings from the Fish and Wildlife Service that were negative, like they had negative findings, so they didn't want to list them, and so they were sued twice And twice, a federal judge ruled in their favor, in the buffalo's favor, saying that the Fish and Wildlife Service needed to go back to the drawing board and actually look at the best available science. So in my mind, I thought that may have triggered this, because it kind of came hot on the heels of it. But we've been looking for a new plan for a long time. The current interagency bison management plan has been expired since 2015. It's outdated. It doesn't make any sense. It was crafted by livestock interests. It doesn't even serve its own purpose. So there's been a new plan that's been needed for a very long time. So now we have this opportunity to, they're in the scoping phase, which is the beginning phase, the very, very beginning phase. They're throwing out these 3 alternatives, and we have an opportunity to comment on those and help shape what's going to happen within the next, it's going to be about a year and a half before there's a final decision made on this new plan. One of the alternatives is to do nothing, to keep the status quo, which obviously nobody likes, maybe except for the cattle interests. Another alternative kind of changes some things, but it also, it includes the Park Service hazing buffalo, pushing buffalo towards and beyond the boundary of Yellowstone National Park so that hunters can shoot them. That's outrageous. That's just unacceptable. There's a third alternative, which would help increase the population to upwards of 8,000 buffalo, which we know Yellowstone and the surrounding landscape can absolutely sustain. And it would put an end to capture for slaughter operations, which is huge. That is huge. So that is an alternative that we can support, although it still doesn't go far enough, because that alternative, while the best one offered, still looks for hunting and quarantine, which is a domestication process, to manage these buffalo. And we're saying, hey, this population, even at 8,000, that's not enough buffalo to have a sustainable hunt. Quarantine is a domestication process. It's taking buffalo from the wild place where they were born, turning them into a commodity, bumping them behind fences. So while alternative 3 is the best of the 3 choices they've given us, we can still build on that. We have an opportunity to build on that to help shape this process. And so it's a big deal, but they're not giving us much time. We only have until February 28th to submit comments. And then coming up right away next week on the 9th and 10th of February are virtual meetings where you can listen to what the Park Service has to say, and you can offer comments and ask questions and get a better understanding of this process. So we have a lot of opportunity here to help shape what's about to happen with federal and state and tribal management of the last wild buffalo.
Yeah, that's another reason I wanted to have you back on, is because they sprung this. It felt like they sprung this out of the blue. We don't have much time to respond, but
right.
But it's important that we do respond. And even though they've only offered those 3 alternatives, we could still, in our comments, we're free to say, even your best alternative isn't good enough, right? We can still say
exactly.
All right, that's great. So,
and yes,
go ahead.
And we can offer what just think about it from the buffalo's perspective. What would they choose if this plan was put before them? What would they choose? What's their preferred alternative? And that's the way we're going to be coming at it.
Right. And I want to go back to that point about domestication versus wildness, because some people have said, they're sending the bison off to Indian tribes and things like that, so there'll still be plenty of bison. But I think it's important to know that this is like the last herd that still literally knows how to be wild in the wild, right? And that wildness itself is something we should be preserving. Would you agree?
Exactly. I mean, especially, so Yellowstone's made up of two subpopulations, the central herd and the northern herd. And the central herd are the direct descendants of the 23 buffalo who saved themselves from extinction. They are the last continuously wild buffalo to have lived on the landscape since prehistoric times. All the other buffalo in the country, on this continent, have been placed there by humans, have had some human manipulation. The central herd of Yellowstone is an exception to that. They are truly the last wild buffalo. And so when you capture them and put them behind fences and run them through basically cattle production paradigms to transport them to other lands, I mean, you're essentially turning them into livestock. You're stealing them from their homelands. You're taking them away from wolves and grizzly bears who also need them to be there. You're not allowing them to walk the earth as she intended for them to do. You're putting them behind fences. You're allowing them to become commodities. You're basically reducing them to nothing but food for humans, and their lives have so much more meaning than that. I mean, they are. I mean, feel free, please go ahead.
Here. Yeah, I agree completely, and it's kind of a new thing for a lot of us to think about the idea that an animal like the bison could have a culture. But, I mean, a culture is really just learned behaviors that are passed down from generation to generation. And the central herd has that. I mean, right? It doesn't... The idea, the knowledge, like where's the best place to have a calf? When should we go from, this place to that place? That's knowledge that gets built up in the herd over literally thousands of years, and to
thousands and thousands of years, exactly. And that knowledge is passed through the mothers, the grandmothers, the aunties, and these are the very ones who are getting gunned down and captured at the boundaries of Yellowstone National Park. I mean, the adult females are the ones who they have the whole family. The mature bulls, they get to go off and kind of do their own thing until the rut, and then everyone gets together. But through the hard times, through the really difficult times, it's the mothers and the grandmothers and the aunties who are teaching the youth, who are bringing forth all this new life and showing them what it means to be a buffalo. Which way is the best way to go in this time of year? Where's the best place to find good amounts of grass? What's the best way to get to the water that we need? How do we safely make it to this place or that place? And they're the ones who are being killed as they enter the state of Montana.
Yeah.
And we need to protect them. We have got to protect them if we want truly to have wild buffalo continuing to live on this continent. And this is the last wild herd that exists. And I don't know that people know the importance of that, because as you'll hear, there's 500,000 buffalo all over the country. Yeah, but they're mostly ranched. They're mostly in public herds that are, have a livestock paradigm management scheme going on. They're raised as food. It's essentially game farming. And so what you have in Yellowstone with the central herd is a very special, unique thing. And that is something that is so sacred and must be protected. And that's, what we're dealing with here is these particular buffalo are the last of their kind. And we must raise our voices, and we must represent them. And we must consider things from their perspective as a wild being who was created to walk the earth and eat the grass and live of their own accord.
So if somebody wants to participate in this, if they want to put a comment in, how do they go about doing that?
You can go to our Facebook page right now, Buffalovers, Buffalovers, and there's a link in there, and it'll take you to the Park Services page. We're going to, very soon in the next, if not today, in the next couple of days, we'll have our own take action with talking points. But it's pretty simple. The alternatives they're offering right now are pretty simple. And if you speak from the heart, if you think about the buffalo's perspective, if you think about being a wild migratory creature on this planet, you know what to say. And you can also, the web address is a little bit complicated, but if you Googled Yellowstone National Park bison scoping comments, it'll take you right there. It'll tell you, oh, new plan, here it is. And it's pretty easy.
Okay.
And this, like I said, this is the beginning phase. There's going to be a lot more that comes along with this over the course of the next year and a half or so. But this first phase is going to help really shape the discussions that come ahead.
All right. So were you surprised, Stephany, when Yellowstone just sort of all of a sudden threw this open? Did this come?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a long time coming. We've been asking for a new plan forever. But, yeah, I was surprised that it just, all of a sudden, oh, here we go. Okay.
All right. Well, all right. So thanks for the update. And, I'll definitely be making a comment, and I hope some of my other listeners will join in.
Yes, please. And then, again, the virtual meetings coming up this coming week. If you can tune in, there's 2 different days with different times, and that's all on the Park Service webpage, which you can find on our Buffalovers Facebook page, or looking up Yellowstone National Park bison scoping comments.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Stephany, for coming on, and this is all kind of short notice, all a little bit rushed, but you've been preparing for it for a long time, right? You've been looking at this issue for yes. Okay.
For quite a number of years. Yes, and thank you so much for having me on and having this conversation, and always appreciate it. Always enjoy it.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Okay. I guess we got to move on now, but anybody can call in now and comment on what Stephany had to say at 877-909-1007, or send us a text at 419-973-5841. Okay, thanks, Stephany. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
That was Stephany, one of our wonderful guests that love having her on. But like I say, I kind of broke a rule in having her on so soon after the last time, but it was after our last interview that all of a sudden, maybe Yellowstone, maybe they're listening. Maybe the Park Service is like, oh, they covered that on 4 Green Future.
There was a hot scoop and you went for it.
Yeah, it could be. Okay, but now on to our wonderful, wonderful sponsors. 4 Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And if you'd like to know what's going on with the Wood County Park District, there's several ways you can check on them. One is to just give them a call at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. You can also go to their website, wcparks.org, and they have a nifty app. Go to any app store and search for WC Parks. It's free. They won't be taking any money from you. And they're also on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., etc., etc. That's the Wood County Park District. And our show is also brought to you by a wonderful group of people, far-thinking, concerned about the environment, just the sort of people you'd like to have as friends and neighbors. Our patrons. Our patrons are people who've gone to patreon.com, that's Patreon, and they searched for A Green Future. Our page popped up, and with a few simple clicks of the mouse, they signed up to support our show at a monthly rate that they can afford. And so every month a little bit comes out of their checking account, comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. And we're very, very appreciative of our patrons. And join them, won't you? Become a patron yourself. And then you can feel, good every Sunday when you listen to the show. You can say, I helped make that happen. And something that happens every Sunday, thank you, Rebecca, is Rebecca's report. So what have you got for us this week, Rebecca?
Well, okay, those of you who have listened to a lot of episodes, our regular listeners, may remember that I was big into the Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House books as a kid. And so my conception of blizzards was largely formed by the book The Long Winter, which I think is it's late in the series, one of the last 2 or 3. It happens when, I think, Laura is about junior high, early high school age. And they have this series of blizzards that starts in October and goes till April or May out in South Dakota. It's bad. The trains can't get through. A lot of people lose their crops because it starts so early. They can't get supplies. They can't even buy food. So yeah, that blizzard is pretty serious blizzard. They say things in the book like the first blizzard hits while the kids are all still in school. So the teacher ties them all together with a rope, or has them all hold on to a rope or something, hold hands, I can't remember, and they go through the town going from house to house because there's zero visibility at all. So they have to kind of guess where a house is and drop off a couple kids there till they get to the end of the line. And it all almost goes terribly wrong at a couple points. Uh-huh. And then I think Laura and Carrie get home, the 2 sisters who are school age. They get back to their house, and she goes to wipe the moisture off of her eyelids, and her fingers come away pink because the snow particles have been driven into her eyelids, and she has a bunch of little tiny cuts, so her eyelids are bleeding.
Wow.
And apparently also there's a thing where they have to string a rope from the house to the barn, tie it up to the house, and have it go out to the barn so that they don't get lost in the snowdrift when they have to go milk the cow. So that was my idea of a blizzard, which is not like the blizzard we have right now, thank heavens.
Yeah, that kind of makes you appreciate school buses.
Yeah.
Story. A little better than they used to have.
Although, could they have gotten through at that point? It's hard to say. But yeah, so I wanted to find out exactly what a blizzard is. What's the definition? A blizzard is a snowstorm with 35 mile per hour winds, under quarter mile visibility, I believe, or 3/4 of a mile visibility. Sorry, and it has to go on for 3 hours or more. Apparently, blizzards can actually occur after a snowfall. That's called a ground blizzard, when there's no snow falling, but it's just all the snow blowing around, so you can't see anything. Blizzards can be caused by, a lot of them in America are caused by nor'easter storms on the East Coast, where there's moving up the East Coast and gathering. There's air doing that and gathering moisture from the Atlantic, and so that causes a lot of New England storms. Blizzards can stretch thousands of kilometers. They can happen in temperate, polar, or high mountain regions. Severe blizzards can have over 72 mile per hour winds and near zero visibility and a temperature under 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Antarctic blizzards are kind of the most severe. They're caused by winds spilling over the ice plateau at 99 miles per hour. So that sounds exciting. The first recorded blizzard was, the word was first used in 1829, and it has something. It's just like, it means something like blow. Okay. Basically, big blow. And it was popularized in the winter of 1880-1881, which was Laura Ingalls Wilder's blizzard.
Oh, all right.
They can also be caused when the jet stream dips too far south, and you get cold, dry polar air meeting warm, humid southern air, which is, I think, probably the kind we're having right now.
Yeah, that's what's going on.
Yeah, and in the U.S., they usually don't get south of, say, the Texas Panhandle. Mostly, I hope. That's not going to change. And they can also be formed by a cold core over the Hudson Bay, getting out of place, wandering south, and meeting the warm air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico over Canada, the Great Lakes, and New England. Or low-pressure systems moving from the Rockies to the Great Plains out west. So apparently Laura's blizzard in the 1880s caused flooding in the Missouri because when all the snow started to melt, and the town of Yankton was completely obliterated by flooding. Another thing that I remember from that book, they had to do a thing where they ran out of coal, so they had nothing to heat the house with. So, and there were crazy winds going on. So they had an idea to braid straw. They had a machine for braiding straw. Huh. I'm not sure why they had this machine, but you had to put the straw in, feed the straw in, and turn a crank. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, and then it would get dense enough so that you could burn it and make a good fire.
Oh, I see.
But the thing was, basically, somebody had to be turning the crank 18 hours a day. So, wow. Yeah, they got 8 hours of sleep, and then from then on, somebody was on the straw braiding machine at all times, like making it into rope. I think the purpose was to make straw into rope, basically. That's what it was originally for.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so they did that. They say also that in that blizzard, they had the rope reading out to the barn. Some places the snow covered entire first stories, and some people had to dig tunnels to get to the barn to milk the cow. Milking the cow having been a big thing in that that period of time. Cow, the horses, all that stuff. So
right.
So yeah, this is a blizzard. It's not that kind of blizzard. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, we don't need it to be as harsh.
No, it's all right.
But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of houses up in Michigan, and there were in western New York, downwind of Lake Erie there, where I grew up a lot of my childhood. A lot of houses with doors on the second floor. And that's the reason, is so that if when the first floor is completely covered with snow, you could still get out the house.
I just assumed that they used to have a balcony, but it was gone now or something.
I mean...
Which probably happens sometimes, but more in city houses.
Yeah, a lot of houses have what you'd call an airing deck, where you'd go out and you'd actually sleep out there in the hot summer nights because it would be cooler outside than in the house.
Right.
So some have the porch part too, but a lot of them, literally, there's just a wall with a door.
Right.
And that's wise, because snowfalls used to regularly, routinely get that deep. So so that's cool. And so tying this back, because, radio and programs like this are all about tying things together. Back when there were bison wild on the plains, actually bison droppings were stove fuel.
Nice.
So a lot of the people that settled the plains, the Great Plains, managed to survive some of these winters. When you'd run out of wood or you'd run out of coal, you'd go out and you'd gather buffalo chips, they were called, and those had enough cellulose left in them that you could literally burn them in a stove and survive.
Cool.
And then tying it forward to next week, I actually have our guest lined up for next week already. He's a scientist that has published a paper explaining how global warming is actually leading us here in the U.S. to have more severe winters. The winters are shorter because the air is warmer to begin with, and it takes more time to get cold. But once it gets cold, it's getting much colder because of global warming, and he's gonna lay that out for us. So
it's all just been lately, long gray blizzard, more long gray, very hot.
Yeah, right. Going from hot to cold to hot to cold, from very hot.
This is not even a climate
cold
anymore. We don't know what it is.
It's just randomness.
Yes.
And when thinking about that, pasteurization, which is where you get milk and you kill all the bacteria in it. And the thing about pasteurization is you don't have to boil the milk. All you have to do is shift back and forth between hot and cold often enough. And even bacteria, which are super tough critters, they're very difficult to kill, that whipsawing back and forth between super hot and super cold is enough to sterilize the milk. And that's kind of what's happening planet-wide here, is we're kind of going from really severe summers to really severe winters.
We don't want to be sterilized.
No, I don't want the planet sterilized. No, definitely not. That's one reason we've got this show, is to help prevent that from happening. But the process is happening right now. So on to our ecological news segment after. But of course, anybody can join us anytime at 877-909-1007.
do you have a blizzard story, either recent or from your childhood, perhaps, that you'd like to share with us? I mean, a lot of people this year have been talking about the blizzard of 77, 78, because this kind of reminds them of it. But it's sort of, this is not anywhere near what that was. But let's hear some blizzard stories if people have them. So on to Eco News. And our first story is one that we've been following, unfortunately, for almost 2 years now. It's the first time we reported on it. Oh, and I do have to say, last week I said this was the start of our 3rd year. This is actually the start of our 4th year of For a Green Future, if you can believe that. I mean, it seems to have just sort of whizzed right by. But for the past 2 years, we've been following a story about the European taxonomy, which is basically just sort of the glossary at the end of the European Union's climate policy, the glossary that defines things, and so the question is, what is actually a green investment? And unfortunately, the European Union, under the quote-unquote leadership of the evil Ursula von der Leyen, who's the president of the EU, and I've always got to add evil in front of Ursula now, has decided that nuclear power and gas power, methane power, natural gas, are both green. Yeah, I know.
So virtually everything except for maybe actual coal is green now.
Right. Yeah.
Except it's really not.
Right. Except really it isn't, according to the EU. And this was a purely political decision. Plus evil decision, evilness and political. Often those two go together. Yep. But because there was a panel of scientists who were empowered by the European Union, it was called the European Union Commission, and they all said no. They all said no, nukes aren't green, and natural gas isn't green. But a couple of the bigger countries, like France, wanted nukes included, even though a lot of the other countries didn't. And Germany actually wanted natural gas included because Germany wants to shift some more natural gas. And the argument for natural gas is that it's less carbon intensive than coal, but that's actually not true. It's less intensive at the point where you burn it. Burning natural gas puts less CO2 in the air than burning coal, but many studies have shown that the process of getting the natural gas, which is most often now fracking, actually puts more methane into the air, and it more than makes up the difference with coal. So natural gas is just as bad as coal, but not according to the European Union now, that has decided to somehow just declare them green. And of course, nuclear power, don't get me started on nuclear power.
Really might make you glow green eventually if things go, but it's still not actually green in the sense of
maybe healthy. That's what they're thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
Although what you actually glow is blue. That's radiation color.
That's different. So not even green in that sense.
No, I got a bunch of my coworkers when I was in a factory, knew I was anti-nuclear, and they tried to play a practical joke on me because we got a shipment of parts in from Fukushima, and what they did is they took some glow sticks and broke them open and poured them in the bottom of the crates and said, Joe, there's something weird about those crates. Go take a look. And I looked, and I really appreciated the joke, but I of course immediately knew, because they picked green glow sticks. I had to come back and tell them, I'm sorry guys, radiation is blue, but good effort. It was really worth it was pretty funny, but there you go. Oh, and if you watched Chernobyl, the HBO series, they accurately depicted one of the spookiest and scariest things. When Chernobyl was burning, it sent this bright blue beam up into the atmosphere because the burning core was so intensely radioactive that it was actually ionizing the air above it, and you could literally look up into the stratosphere, and there was this blue shaft of light that the people of the town were, Chernobyl, Pripyat, nearby, were like, oh, what's that big blue glow? Because they didn't know that it meant that the thing was so intensely radioactive that it would
Maybe just a really big car dealership is opening up.
Yeah, or maybe there's some play or something over there, but no. Yeah. So anyway, so that's a little bit of bad news. Now, a couple of the European countries have said they're going to sue in court because this definition is so ridiculous, and almost every environmental group.
Flaming load of buffalo chips is what it is.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And every environmental group in Europe is decrying this, including the World Wildlife Fund, which has done a big publication about it. And when the World Wildlife Fund, which is about one of the most what I would call tamest environmental groups there is, when they come out against something, it's got to be bad, because it takes a lot to get the World Wildlife Fund involved in something like this. But everybody is fighting it, but the evil Ursula
has to be on a level with, well, let's solve our energies by burning panda bears.
Yeah, exactly. Panda bear fuel. I guess that could be carbon neutral, maybe. I don't know. So I don't know.
I'm thinking not.
Probably not. Yeah, you'd have to ship them, and okay, never mind. All right, so that's it for that little bit of bad news. Little bit of interesting news. Another story that we've been following for years. Time for an HB6 update. FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has actually done an audit of First Energy and discovered that First Energy spent $71 million doing their evil anti their pro HB6 anti HB6 repeal program, and quite a bit of that money was directly from ratepayer to lobbyist, which turns out to be illegal. Yeah. Their utilities.
Sounds illegal.
Yeah, it is illegal. Utilities are not allowed to spend the money, the check that you send them on lobbying and influencing government. And the reason that law was put into place, it's pretty obvious, is that these companies are monopolies, and they're supposed to be what's called a regulated monopoly. But if you give this a monopoly the ability and the power to lobby and dictate to the government what they want, then what you get is essentially you get this company running the government. I mean, and that is pretty much what happened in Ohio. Is First Energy and AEP and the other utilities were pretty much running the state, and they still have a massive influence, but they didn't even respect the boundaries that are set up in law, which is that you can't use ratepayer money for this. So this is just the latest of the many evil things that it turns out happened around pushing House Bill 6 through. And FERC says they're going to force the company to refund, to pay back this money to the ratepayers. But usually what that means is that you'll get a 25-cent credit on your bill for a couple years, and with no explanation. And because it doesn't take long to spread out the impact. And I have said before, and I still believe, that some of this money that FERC is being fined and penalized should go to the citizens groups that were fighting House Bill 6, because they were the ones standing up for us and trying to prevent us from getting ripped off. But yet when the crook gets caught, the organizations that actually helped catch them or helped point out their evilness still have to rely on donations from people, and it's not a good. It's not enough of a punishment. I think First Energy should be required to just give money to these groups that fight First Energy's legislative agenda. But
if it's going to be diverted for political purposes,
yeah, why not?
Why not? Yeah.
All right. On to our next story. This comes to us from England, and the equivalent in England of the EPA is the EA. That's just the Environment Agency. And there was a story in The Guardian about how what's happened since Boris Johnson and the Tories, took over, the Conservatives essentially took over the government.
they cut the funding for the EA in half from 2010 to 2020, from 170 million pounds down to 94 million pounds. And they switched from an enforcement regime, which is, the EA agents go and they find pollution, and then they go and they fine the company that put the pollution in the water when they break the law. They switched from that to self-reporting, which, in other words, England just followed the playbook. They followed what was done to the EPA. And what's happened since then is that all the rivers in England have become horribly polluted, and the people of England are kind of up in arms, because part of what they used to have, was an extremely robust citizen enforcement group. They had literally thousands of volunteers all over England that would go and, take samples and look for pollution. And part of what happened with this cutting out of the agency is they pretty much closed that whole system down. And so the people were willing to do the bulk of the work. But what happens when the conservatives get in? So when these guys with bad hair, like Boris Johnson,
so very bad,
and Trump, when you see the bad hair, that's a signal.
Evidently,
right? There's a flag that they intend to destroy the environment.
It's sort of like that look of the mutton chop whiskers in the 1800s, back when men they had so much power, they didn't have to be in any way appealing to anyone. It was just like a blatant, I can look ugly as all get out because you got to marry me anyway if you want to survive.
Yeah, I think, there
may be a link between excessive empowerment and very bad fashion. I'm not sure.
Could be, yeah.
In some cases, anyway.
Feel like they don't have to care.
Right.
Well, and so in England, the EA definitely felt like they didn't have to care. And what has also happened is that the funding for the agency is increasingly coming from not penalties, but fees assessed on the industry. And a lot of the employees of the EA have been switched more and more. Fewer and fewer of them are what you'd call inspectors or enforcers, and more and more of them are what you'd call sort of middle managers who oversee the collection of these fees from the industries they're supposed to be regulating. And so, if your job is dependent on getting money from a chemical company, you're not going to want to do anything that hurts that chemical company, because that's their profits are what keep you in your nice office, so you can buy your nice clothes and get groomed or not groomed as you decide. So that was just a story that I wanted to say, that they follow the same playbook as the conservatives have followed in the U.S. since Ronald Reagan started attacking the Environmental Protection Agency. So, when things happen here, there's reverberations around the world. Other nasty, polluting conservative governments try to copy what we're doing when it's bad, so that's just, I wanted to report on that. Another report I wanted to talk about. Here's another story. Our next story. There was an article in a journal called Science Advances, and way back, you may recall, way back when this pandemic started, there was a lot of talk about the pangolin and how the virus was probably jumping from the animal population to the human population. And, since then, there's been some question. Even President Biden has said, maybe it was made in a lab. But there's no question that most of these endemics and pandemics, like Ebola, for example, are actually coming from wild populations and jumping into the human population. And so what this study did was it looked at the idea of protecting the wildlife and protecting the habitat of these wild animals, and looking at it in terms of preventing these kind of jumps into the human population. Because when you've got the animals stressed, when you're cutting down all their forests, when you're going out and, in the case of the pangolin, hunting them almost to extinction, as that population gets more and more stressed, it becomes more and more vulnerable to diseases like coronavirus. And so you're much more likely
to have a situation where there's a human interacting with a sick animal, and that allows the virus to jump into the human population. And so basically the upshot of this study is that allowing nature to be healthy and wild in terms of prevention of the pandemic starting, it costs 1/20th as much to keep the environment healthy and keep the animals and plants in the environment healthy. And because if you've got a healthy environment, you've got predators. And if you've got predators, if an animal gets sick, like with coronavirus, they are much more likely to be eaten.
Very true.
And taken out of the population. But if you've only got a small number of pangolins, because you're hunting them almost to extinction, almost all of them are going to be sick because of the stresses that you're putting them under in terms of eliminating their habitat, so their food quality is low, and usually you've eliminated a lot of the predators, because that's one of the first things that happens with environmental degradation is people go and hunt all the big, like the tigers and the wolves and the things that eat the things that can get sick. And so it's just an important reminder that allowing wilderness to be wilderness and be healthy wilderness can not only save our lives, but it also saves money. It's only 1/20th the cost.
So it's equivalent of putting human beings in Victorian workhouses, starving them, overworking them, and then wondering why they get sick.
Yeah, that's what's happening to so many of our wild animals. They're being...
Except for with humans, you also pretend it's about their personal hygiene at that point.
Well, and people call animals dirty too. There's a lot of mental prejudices, a lot of cultural prejudices.
They might be thinking about my dog. He does kind of eat poo.
Well, your dog is, objectively speaking.
He's an animal, I tell you. An
Koga's
animal.
a little bit...
He's a little Dickens.
A little dirty dog, I guess you could say. Well, that's all I had lined up for this week. Thanks so much for listening. I did come across one thing that I'm going to be following up next week that I want to talk about a little bit. Oh, we do have time for a real quick call if somebody wanted to call or text. But if you remember, if you would listen to the show in the first 2 years, we had a thing called the Letter from the Future, which was my great-granddaughter Marie I would send us a letter every week from the year, from way in the future. And one of the things she mentioned was that they would, in the future, they destroy all the nasty chemicals and things that they create using something called supercritical water thermal oxidation. And I just, this past week, I just stumbled across, there's a company that is actually using supercritical water thermal oxidation to destroy PFAS, the PFAS pollution, which is so ubiquitous now and contaminating so many areas. It's just nice. Again, it's nice to be right. It's nice to know that, this is probably going to start happening because there are no other.
It would be nicer to be right about good things.
Yeah.
More often.
Well,
Joe is right. A lot of time he's right, but it's about something bad.
Well, this is potentially a very good thing because this technology can be used to eliminate almost any kind of toxic waste. And so if we start doing that, like at the factory,
right, we
could literally create a pollution-free world because we'll just take that whole bit about making the poison that you then turn out into the environment, just eliminate the whole put it out into the environment part. So if we apply this correctly, this could mean an end to chemical pollution, and that would be a very good thing. So,
indeed.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening. I hear the theme song going. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power